Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm the webcast is now live.
Thank you, Caroline. So good morning, panel members, and good morning, members of the public. Thank you for attending this virtual meeting of the Hampshire Police and Crime Panel. So this meeting is being webcast on YouTube and hosted on the Hampshire County Council's website. All decisions at today's meeting will be reached through a vote. I will call for the vote at the appropriate time under each item, with the vote and its outcome to be read audibly. I will begin now by reading the names of the members of the committee so they can confirm their attendance. Members, can you just unmute so that you can confirm your attendance as I read your names so we're sure you can be heard? If everybody now unmutes. So I am Councillor Dave Stewart, Chairman of the Police and Crime Panel, and I'm from the Isle of Wight Council. Can I confirm Councillor Jan Warwick from Hampshire County Council is here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
Morning, Jan. Can I confirm Councillor Diane Andrews from the New Forest District Council is here?
Correct, Chairman.
Thank you. Good morning. Can I confirm Councillor Narinda Baines from Havant Borough Council is here?
I'm in attendance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I confirm Councillor John Beavis, MBE, Gosport Borough Council is here? Haven't got John at the moment. I'll go back to him shortly. Can I confirm Councillor Simon Brown from Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council is here?
Morning, Dave. Yes.
Thank you. Can I confirm Councillor Trevor Cartwright, MBE, Fareham Borough Council is here?
Yes, morning, Dave. I'm here.
Good morning. Can I confirm Councillor Tonya Craig from Eastleigh Borough Council is here?
Good morning, Chair and panel.
Thank you. Can I confirm Councillor Lisa Griffiths from Winchester City Council is here?
All right, yes, good morning. Confirm that I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Hunt from Portsmouth City Council was with us earlier, but I believe is not with us at the moment, but will join us shortly. Can I confirm Councillor Philip Lashbrook from Test Valley Borough Council is here?
Good morning, Chairman. I am present. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I confirm Councillor David McKinney from East Hampshire District Council is here?
Yeah, good morning, Dave. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I confirm Councillor Ken Mersham from Rushmore Borough Council is here?
Yeah, good morning, David. Present and all correct.
Thank you. Can I confirm Councillor James Radley from Hart District Council is here?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I confirm Councillor Dave Shields from Southampton City Council is present?
Present, correct, Chair.
Thank you. We also should have Councillor Tony Jones, who's an additional local authority co-opted member. If Tony's here.
I'm here, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Lamming, additional local authority co-opted member. Are you here, Brian?
Yes, good morning. I'm here.
And Councillor Lynn Stagg, additional local authority co-opted member. Are you there with us, Lynn?
Yes, good morning, Chair. I'm here.
Thank you. I can almost see you across the water. Mr. Michael Coombs, our independent co-opted member. Is Michael with us?
He's just trying to join now, Chairman.
Okay, I did see his picture earlier. And then Mr. Bob Perkis, our independent co-opted member. Bob's here.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I move now for the members of the public's help to the agenda and item 1, which is apologies for absence. We have no apologies have been received for today's meeting. However, Councillor Tony Jones has made me aware that he will need to leave the meeting at 10:30 today. And I mentioned earlier that Councillor Hunt may join us a bit later due to another commitment. Can also confirm that the Police and Crime Commissioner himself contacted me this week to make me aware that he would not be attending the meeting today for personal reasons, which I'm fully understanding of. However, I am pleased to welcome Mr. James Payne, who is the Chief Executive of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, who will talk to the relevant items on today's agenda. James, can I just make sure you're there and you can hear me?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do any members present have any declarations to make which are not already recorded on their members' declarations of interest that we're already aware of? If you could indicate if you have any, by raising your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I will assume that we have none. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting, referred to at pages 5 to 12. Members have had an opportunity to read the minutes of the meeting. This is the meeting held on the 3rd of July 2020, and I'm just seeking members' agreement. I'll reverse the order. Are there any members who do not agree with the minutes? Please show. None indicated. Could you just indicate verbally, members, by unmuting that you're happy in general terms to agree the minutes? You can wave your hand or speak, it doesn't matter which.
Yes, Chairman.
Agree.
Agreed.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, that was very good. So public can hear that the members are not only indicating they agree, but they're verbalising it. Thank you. We then have now at item 4, I have seen the Chief Constable join us on the line. So welcome, Chief Constable. I hope you'll find this an interesting and informative meeting.
Thank you.
Item 4 is deputations, and I am pleased to welcome Councillor Matt Renyard, Valerie Brooks, James Cook and Claire Liddell. If I can just confirm, is Matt there on the line? Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, Chair, thank you.
Welcome, Matt. Valerie?
We haven't got Valerie with us today.
Okay, thank you. James Cook?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, James. Good morning. And Claire Liddell, if I pronounced that correctly.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So you've made a request to give a deputation today under item 8 of the agenda. The Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report is the place at which that comes up. The deputies will have 5 minutes to collectively speak to the panel, and will be told by our support officer when you have 1 minute remaining. So if you would, a bit of echo now. Again, if you could put your mics off everybody else. So if you could put your cameras on and start your deputation when you are ready. And what I will do then, once the deputation's been given, is deal with the next stage. I'll ask Caroline to confirm we're at that place.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We're here today to speak to item 8 on the agenda, Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report, and we would like to make the case that enabling effective and efficient policing, which meets the needs of the people it serves, is falling short of public expectations. That in city suburbs there's a need for more police resources sooner rather than later in both local neighbourhood policing teams and response teams available to respond to current and active incidences. That 101 call handling processes are resource only led with little to no concern shown to the victims of crime. There's a desperate need for retraining of 101 operators and victim management, and the process of closing cases as a matter of course once a crime number is issued gives a contradictory message to the general public that their case is simply not important enough for the police to take seriously. I'd like to now introduce Claire.
Thank you, Matthew. Claire, would you like to speak?
So the 101 call service is falling short of public expectations. My experience of the 101 service has been mixed, but unfortunately mainly negative. My motor scooter was stolen from my property by 4 youths who broke into my garden. On the 4 occasions that I contacted 101 regarding this incident, I only felt listened to once. It felt to me that I had been issued with a crime number, and now, as far as the police are concerned, that was the end of the matter. I have also telephoned 101 to inform them of a youth erratically riding a query stolen motorbike up and down the pavement. This use continued for 1.5 hours, and I telephoned 101 several times. I was informed each time that the incident had been logged. Why was a police car not sent out? Not only was this a danger to pedestrians, other road users, and the youth who was wearing no protective equipment. That motorbike was somebody's pride and joy and could very well have been returned to them. I've heard various accounts of the lack of empathy and compassion of some of the 101 call handlers. A victim's first port of call after a crime is the 101 service. They are feeling vulnerable and possibly unsafe. Surely it is a call handler's duty of care to provide some support and comprehension of what has happened to that person. I have heard that some members of the community are resorting to calling the emergency 999 service as they have lost all confidence in the 101 operators in taking their incident seriously. It is worrying that this vital emergency line is being used in this manner. I feel that there is an urgent need to provide some good quality education and retraining of the 101 operators in victim management and to regain the confidence of the community they serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That was very clear. Matthew, I'm looking to you. Is there any other person?
Yeah, James, would you like to come in, please?
Hello, James.
Good morning. At around 3 a.m. a morning in September, a noise woke me up. I thought it came from my back garden, so I stuck my head out of the bedroom window and called out. I was spotted by two people attempting to break into a van parked next to my house. After a torrent of abuse, they rode their mopeds into my car, smashing half of the windows with a tool or a weapon and causing substantial damage to the bodywork with the same. They were kind enough to let me know that they would be back the following night to smash up and burn me and my house. I immediately phoned 999 to be informed my case would be recorded, but it was unlikely anything would happen. 5 hours later, I was called by someone who took some extra details. Both advised me that the threats made against me were a bit worrying, with the second saying my case should be recorded for intelligence but closed, with any further action unlikely. Neither person was local, so had no understanding of the current situation in a local area. An officer, whom I cannot fault at all, being friendly and caring, did attend 5 days later. To be informed via email of the criteria used to judge the requirements for police attendance was disheartening. Was it the lack of vulnerability in my family that stopped them attending? I do not normally consider myself a vulnerable person, but I would not feel anything but when faced with armed attackers. Would things have been different if my partner had been home alone instead? Was it the severity of the crime? Although not the most shocking of crimes, this property damage and threat of assault has left me and my family feeling very exposed and insecure in our own home, where we have lived for 7 years. I sent my child away that night for his safety and my own peace of mind. It could have been that investigating would not have been an effective use of resources. I don't know what else was going on in Southampton as a whole that morning, but I know my experience was definitely not the worst that took place in my area alone. But it did shake my world. Or was it the likelihood of solving the crime? Both of the people I spoke to were not local. If they had been, they would have known the current situation in the area. They would have known that this is not an isolated incident, and I believe truly if a local officer had been deployed, the crimes committed after mine on the same morning may have been prevented.
As you have heard, residents in my ward, like many suburbs in the city, have been on the receiving end of a series of criminal activity of late. Youths on stolen motorbikes who day and night threaten residents, break into vans, disrupt people's ability to earn a living. It can only be described as deliberate organised crime. The local police team that I've worked with are excellent individuals doing the best they can with limited resources, but it is clear that there is simply not adequate staffing. 10 years of cuts and underfunding have stripped the police's ability to respond to this type of criminal activity. This needs to change. We've circulated with yourselves and the local press relevant requested action and look forward to hearing from the Police and Crime Commissioner along with yourselves for a response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Two things. Thank you for managing that in a very professional way. Thank you also for the residents who have joined you in the deputation for their very clear submission. That is appreciated. The process for our deputation is not that our members will now ask you questions. That doesn't happen. But we do have the opportunity to invite the Police and Crime Commissioner or the Chief Executive today for any response he may wish to make. And then I'll just ask any members of the panel if there's any comment they want to make to me. James, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Chair. To those members of the public who have taken the time to come to the panel, we are so grateful that you have found your way to this forum to share your concerns. And whilst I'm sorry the Commissioner, because of personal circumstances, hasn't been able to hear it, it is my responsibility on his behalf to listen through this forum, to understand your concerns and to work with the Commissioner to create the response back to you. I wanted also just to clarify that the commissioner sets the plan for policing and so sets the strategic direction. And part of his function is to ensure that he scrutinises the chief constable on the work that she and her team and the wider constabulary do in terms of responding to crime and responding to those non-emergency calls on 101. It's the chief constable's responsibility to ensure that she effectively deploys her officers in response to crime, and so we will work closely with the chief constable in looking at the specifics that you brought to us, but your deputation in general regarding the concerns that you've got that the 101 service isn't fit for purpose and that there ought to be more support for those people who represent as victims and the care that needs to be given to them. And that does fall very much within the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And so my thanks, and with sadness, it's not nice to thank people for coming to say we've had a terrible time and that we've been victims. And so it is with sadness that I say thank you to you for coming and bringing it to our attention. And we will take your deputation and Councillor Reynard, thank you for facilitating this. We take your representations extremely seriously, and I give assurances on behalf of the office and the Commissioner that we will be working to look at your deputation and to make an effective response to you.
Thank you, James. Also to the people making the deputation, you obviously have the Chief Constable present and listening with interest, I would say. So already you've achieved something very positive from making the effort to come to the panel today. Are there any comments that members wish to make? I'm seeing a hand up, but I don't know who. I'll ask Caroline if she could indicate who that is.
Apologies, Chairman, that's not visible to myself. Would the member with the hand raised like to
John Beavis.
John Beavis. Councillor Beavis, is there a comment you wish to make?
Yes, Chairman. I think that the deputies raise an important point. I appreciate that the pandemic has resulted in a spike in ASB, but concerns over the 101 service have been expressed throughout Hampshire. And it's really important that the public do have confidence in the system and that we do all we can to regain that confidence, because it's an essential public communication. The point that was made about the 999 service, I noticed that the Chief Constable was making copious notes there, and I'm sure she will take that one forward. But I think the 101 service, we do need to make sure that we regain the public confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon Bound, I see you're there. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, Chair. I thank the deputies for the deputisation. This, as the plan working group, working on some work regarding 101 call handling and resource allocation with the establishment and of course the new officer uplift. So I think it would be worthy for us just to sort of identify to our deputies that I'm happy to incorporate that into our piece of work that we're currently undertaking.
Okay, so the feedback then is to the deputation already that first of all the Chief Executive has acknowledged from the OPC, has acknowledged your deputation in the way that he has. You've had the opportunity for the Chief Constable to hear it firsthand, which is really good. And we as a panel, we have what we call a plan working group. So what we do, we monitor the plan of the Commissioner, and we have various activities we do to make sure these things are followed through. And Simon Bound, who chairs that, has undertaken to incorporate that in the work we're doing. So hopefully you will feel that your deputation today, and I'm sure you've all put a lot of work into preparing such a clear presentation, and we know you're in front of an all sorts of audience here, so it's an experience in itself, but hopefully you feel it's valid, it's been listened to and will be acted upon, and that's the most important thing. So I would thank you very much. I now must ask you to leave the meeting as a formal attendee, but you are able, if you wish, to follow the broadcast on YouTube when we'll be dealing with the chairman's announcements and also the Chief Constable's presentation. So you're welcome to do that in that sort of wider context if you wish. Caroline, I'll ask you now to deal with the adjustment of who's in the meeting, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wait wait for Caroline to. If you let me
Thank
know, Caroline, when I can go ahead.
Of course, Chairman, please proceed. Thank you. The deputations have now left the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you, everybody. I'm now moving to item 5, which is the chairman's announcements. First of all, I'm pleased to welcome Councillor Narinda Baines, who has recently been appointed to the panel by Havant Borough Council. Welcome. I would also like to offer my thanks to the Chief Constable for attending our meeting today, and also to her and her team, along with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, for providing information, an information briefing to members earlier this week regarding progress against the recruitment of new police officers for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, funded through the Council TAP Precept and the central government UFLIS. So thank you for that. Since our last meeting, the panel has made a contribution to a number of national consultations. These include the review into the role of the police and crime commissioners, being led by the Home Office, and a consultation on the recent police complaints reform. Last week, the panel supporting officer and I attended a webinar which was led by the Local Government Association, updating police and crime panels from across the country on a number of key matters of current importance. And we look forward to joining the National Conference for Police and Crime Panels next month, along with the Vice Chair, Councillor Jan Warwick, and Councillor Simon Bound. Recognising her work in supporting our panel, our Democratic Support Officer, Caroline, has been asked by Frontline Consulting to lead an online workshop next week for recently appointed PCP supporting officers from 7 other panels. Finally, I would like to invite all those attending today's meeting to join me in a minute's silence at 11 o'clock this morning, being observed by the Metropolitan Police and forces nationally to mark 1 week on from the murder of Sergeant Matt Ratana, to remember and to pay tribute to him. And although that will probably be in the middle of the Chief Constable's presentation, I'm sure logistics will be arranged so that that can take place. Item 6 now is the Police and Crime Commissioner's announcements. The Commissioner's team will now share a video recording of his announcements due to his absence. Caroline, I'll hand over to you.
I'll pick up from Caroline if I may, Chair. The
Thank
team
you, James.
here are going to press play shortly, but I just wanted to again apologise on behalf of Michael, who due to difficult personal circumstances is not able to be here with us today, and he does extend his apologies to you all. He has been able to record his announcements, and so I'd like to play these for you now.
I'm recording this message in case I can't be with you, to set for you, the panel, a strategic context of the work that I, as Police and Crime Commissioner, and my team in the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, led by James Payne and supported by staff who interact with those who deliver services and contribute to all the statutory requirements that we have. It would be fair to start with a comment about COVID. I have always taken a scenario-driven approach that looks at risk, that looks at options both for opportunities and for pressures that would apply. COVID has changed the world, and I mean the world, and it has changed a lot of what we do locally to support our communities, to support those who are vulnerable, at risk, to protect victims, to create opportunities for people to stay out of any part of or engagement with the criminal justice system, because they have the thing that keeps us safest, vibrant communities and opportunities for their lives. This is much interfered with. I planned for this contingency of a second spike very early on and sought to plan as soon as the COVID pandemic seemed to have potential to ensure that my team could work remotely, could work in added value ways to sustain the services that we provide and to support those whom we commission. And of course, I include in that the ability to challenge and test the Chief Constable and her team for delivering the policing element of keeping us safer, meeting community needs, and being sure that we were protecting that community, the community of policing, so that they could both be respected as a community, kept safe, and in that we, the communities they serve, would be kept safer because they would be well and able professionally to respond to the crisis we face. So very early in the pandemic element, I was alert to, and then it happened that the elections were here, and I understood and committed as a matter of duty to continue for the extra year. I was clear at that point that it was essential not just to continue as we were, but to recognize the issues that we were facing and to create a new plan. Much of it, I think, was updated, but I want to be clear that it was a new plan that understood the context we were working in. I am clear on the priority for funding policing, which is an area that the panel concentrates on significantly, our community concentrates on, and policing itself lobbies about. And I have fought for from day one, and I suspect will be fighting for to the last day of my time in this office, to create the right funding for our area. But I need to be clear that, in my view, there will be other funding priorities and challenges in the near future and for the longer term. This makes the arguments for what policing can do, which is 98% and a bit or more of my budget, the budget that is funded by taxpayers, that task of increasing that to the right sum of money, to apportioning it to meet new demands, new pressures from the criminal fraternity who wish to commit crime and in many cases wish us harm, and new demands from our communities to keep them safe. The standalone requirement to make the case for right funding is something that I continue to have close to my heart and my operational work to deliver as your PCC. But I do understand and believe there will be massive pressures on local government, on the care system, on education, on those things that sustain the economy to create jobs and opportunities for people to be self-sustaining themselves. And it would be wrong at this time not to recognize that those will provide a pressure, and that pressure will be first felt, if it's not being felt in lots of areas already, for the PCC and the finances in the budget that I set this coming year. It is why the Chief Constable and I have a range of workshops and briefings and study efforts to create scenarios and understand where we might be in a range of options that may come. And the most likely options will put pressure on budgets, and because there's pressure on budgets, pressure on resources, capacity, and ability to modernize and change, we must sustain an ability to win the battle. And it is absolutely essential, and you'll hear from the Chief Constable later in the day to the questions that you've asked her, essential that we focus on the prime responsibility of keeping our communities safer. And that will be challenging this year, as I say. On to the future, there are elements of change in governance in this country. There are pressures from Brexit, there are pressures from the economy, there are pressures from social care, as I've said. My focus is to accept those pressures, to understand them as well as I can, but to create options to take opportunities in the future when they present, and to understand so that policing can go forward in its emergency service element, knowing, relying on the minimum sense of resource and support they have. that the leadership of policing understands the constraints and is very focused on the highest priorities for keeping us safe, very focused on adapting and tuning to ensure that we maximize the outcomes from the resources that we have. And you will find as a theme, those elements follow through in the formal presentations. You will hear, as you do at this time of year, and it was expected, you would have anticipated that I wouldn't be here to present it, but because of the extension of my term, a report of last year, which contains a lot of successes and planning. The successes stand, the preparation and the baseline against which we went into the pandemic crisis and the future economic and social crises and issues and pressures that we have put us in better stead than if we had not had a good year last year. But for the moment that this change in our environment, for the economy, for the health, for the security of our communities, and the need to fight our way to something that is vibrant and future fit, means that there is much more concentration on the future in different ways rather than a full continuity of where we were. And I hope you will see that from the new plan I created, from the engagement with partners who we've supported to continue serving people in our communities at the front line and where the vulnerable and those at risk find themselves, to maximize our impact, to mitigate those risks, to continue services where that's possible, to tune services to appropriateness for today's circumstances, and to understand those things that we need to stop doing and do something differently. And again, in the presentations that we do as the day goes on, as this panel goes on, and as I continue to work for our communities and to the key event in the new year of setting the next budget, that my focus is on making plans that support what the future will need, that keep our communities as safe as they can and contribute beyond policing into a safer, just society that realizes the potential and improves the potential, I'm sad to say, with a higher priority, because we need to recover from what has stepped back. So my focus is on keeping our communities safer, of applying our resources in the OPCC and my efforts to create opportunities for improvement, for protection, for safety, for adjusting to new realities and being sustainable into the recovery period that we must find our way to in the not too far distant timescale, but through a period that is going to be constrained and at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Am I comfortable now moving on to the next item, because I know we're going to come back to you in the police and crime panel, or is there further you wish to add at this point?
No, Chair, thank you. I've got other parts to play during the course of
Yes,
this.
yes, I was just checking. Okay, members, we're now going to move to item 7, which is delivering policing and community safety during a global pandemic. And I am, as I said earlier, pleased to welcome Chief Constable Olivia Pinckney to our meeting today, who is going to provide an update to the panel on policing during the COVID-19 pandemic, along with other matters which various panel members have raised, which we submitted in a sort of guidance to support the preparations for our scrutiny of the Commissioner's proposed precept in January. After the Chief Constable has spoken, I will invite the Commissioner to speak, or in this case, the Commissioner's Chief Executive, and after which members will have the opportunity to raise questions of the Commissioner that have not already been dealt with. Two things I'd highlight again. We will pause at 11 o'clock, and I know Caroline will deal with that. And after this particular item, we'll take a short break, which will enable various people to adjust their position. I'm sure the Chief Constable will then need to deal with other matters. So that's where we are. I now hand over to the Chief Constable, and thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and very much for this opportunity to come and share thoughts with you. And I'm also very grateful for the questions that have been submitted. I'll endeavour, Chair, if this works, and your steer, please, to kind of weave the specifics of the questions into my presentation. And I've got them on a separate slide, so my outline will flip around. But if I, of course, if I miss any, or indeed I don't go into the detail that anyone would like, I'm sure you'll pick me up. But that's my intention and hope. Caroline, thank you. You're in charge of the slides. I've also set my alarm for 10:59. So between us, we will do that. And hugely grateful that the members of the panel wish to join with that 1 minute of reflection in memory of the murder of Matt Matana, our colleague. That does impact upon the whole of the police family, and I would argue this panel is very much part of that police family too. So thank you for the grace of doing that. So the panel, you've raised some really significant themes. They're all up for discussion. They're all very current, very live, and actually all very much interlinked. So if I can turn, Caroline, to the first slide, and because I'm dipping around with various slides. Yeah, so if we go on to the next one, Caroline, thanks. It's all very well working on Teams, isn't it? But we try and hold 3 screens at once. So those are the 3 areas that I'm going to talk to. If we can then move on to the next one, which is very much the COVID response. So if I give an overarching view on those subjects, and then I will ensure that I've covered off the specific questions as well. So much like the Commissioner has just said in his recording, when we knew in earnest that COVID was coming to us in a very big way to our society, then, back in end of March, early April, I set out my approach for the organisation for this year as well. And it was important to kind of root as to what was still the same, but also to very much kind of flex our focus and our approach to other things as well. So right from the start, I set out to the organisation an amended strategy. You'd expect me to do that. But there were some very obvious things in it. So one of those things was, we will make organisational decisions as soon as we can, and we won't leave everything to the autumn. That meant doing things like sergeants' promotions in a very different way. But I'm really glad we did that, because we're now in the autumn and we know we are potentially barely halfway through. But operationally, we also wanted to focus on crimes behind locked doors. So when we were all staying at home, for many of us, so sadly, home is not the safe place to be. So we shifted our focus onto crime and harm behind those closed doors, which was everything from child abuse to domestic abuse to defrauding of the elderly and other matters. But also a huge focus, as you would expect, around looking after my people. They are our most important asset. I have a duty legally and morally, of course, to them. But there was something very much to ensure that I was asking people to keep coming to work as I am, and I will come on to that in a moment. And I needed to ensure they could do that with confidence and that knew that they were getting the support from me and their senior leadership. But there was also a lot of learning. We've been able to accelerate a number of things that we were going to do. We've brought into the here and now, and also some real kind of learning and opportunities for us in terms of policing as and when we get back to a new normal. And I was really clear from the start that we were not going to miss a step in some of our really big things, such as, the officer uplift, and I will give the detail of that. Our digital work, which is such an enabler for the public, as well as the new way that crimes are being committed in so many active ways. But also in terms of our estate and working hand in glove with the Commissioner and his team to ensure that we were doing the big thinking and the big planning around our estate. Those things are slow, they're expensive, but they need to be dealt with. And we have absolutely not missed a step there. And I was also very clear that, we were in the middle of then a major incident. We are out of major incident now. We are still in emergency. But it was not a question of, at the end of all of this, going back to where we were, but very much heading for where we would want to be. So kind of what changed in the first 10 weeks, if you can cast your minds back to March and April, in the first kind of 10 weeks, we had a huge reduction in calls into policing. So to give you a sense of scale, in those first 10 weeks, our calls were about half down in the 101, and I'll come on to the detail from deputation, which I really have heard earlier in the meeting. We had a quarter fewer 999 calls. Now that kind of all makes sense, doesn't it? There were fewer people out and about, people weren't driving, etc., etc. So we had that kind of extraordinary time of reduced demand from the public. And we also had the public doing something which I was really grateful for, and we didn't ask, but we had a 700% uplift in people choosing to contact us online. There's huge ability and accessibility of approaching us online. It doesn't suit everyone, I know that, but a huge uplift in people who just shifted themselves online, which it kept our 101 waiting times down, but it also means that I can deal with those inquiries there and then by people who are working in remote buildings. We're all doing that in our various organisations. It's no different for me. So it meant that we could operate in that way. And of course, that's one of the things that we are looking to retain as time goes on. We found our nighttime economy just stopped, and with that came a real reduction in things like some of our serious sexual offences outside of the home, and at the time, the most serious violence reduced as well. We also had to change and wanted to change the way that we connected with our public. So the real world opportunities we would normally have of meetings and communities and bumping into people, that changed overnight. And I'm hugely grateful to our neighbourhood policing teams, because one of the things that they did was shift onto mass engagement online, largely through Facebook, though not exclusively so. And at the height of the lockdown, bearing in mind our population is 2 million, we were having over 2.5 million engagements a week through our Facebook channels. That was extraordinary. There was a real thirst for information. It was a two-way flow. It worked brilliantly. We could answer loads of questions. We could explain what we were doing. We explain, why we were and where we were and all those kind of things. Now, of course, that's dropped down, but that's given us a really strong bedrock of people who know that the police are in that space, that it is a very kind of fast-paced kind of toing and froing in terms of communication, and people are sticking with it, which is great for me, because one of the challenges always for policing is how we explain what we're doing, where we're doing it, why we're doing it, and why we're not doing other things. So that's a really great opportunity for us. And I think, what I would also say is in terms of the 101 dropping down, I will come on to how that is now very much with the theme from the deputation. So that was at the beginning. The 4 E's approach, which hopefully you're well aware of, and that stood us in really good stead. So that's engagement, explaining, encouraging, and enforcement as a last resort. Today, that's slightly different. We're doing a shorter encouragement because everyone knows the rules around here, but I can come on to that in a minute. Where we are now is we are back at normal demand levels around normal both events and incidents and crimes. So that first 10 weeks, that kind of very odd bubble has absolutely reverted to normal times. And we didn't sit on our laurels in that time either. We went after all our people who were suspects awaiting arrest. We used that time to go and knock on the doors. Lots of them were at home. That was useful to kind of get the people in and kind of clear our decks of works that was outside. So we were far from resting in that period. We kind of ramped up our approach and took the opportunity when we had it. So to give you a sense of scale now, normal crime, normal policing demand is up at the usual levels. But in addition to that, we have what we call the health calls, the COVID calls. And to give a sense of scale, across our whole area, we have approximately, because it does vary depending on the day of the week, approximately 120, 130 health calls, COVID calls a day. We have many of those. We share all that data. We hotspot map it so that our district commanders are able to plot their patrol plans around where the majority of concerns from the public are coming from. And equally, we share fully all of that data with our local authority colleagues, because a lot of it rests around things like takeaway licensing and that kind of thing, where there are larger than should be groups gathering outside. So it's far from just a static position. It's very much a kind of a map and a very much a data sharing, information sharing across all of us, so that each of us can play our part with our various kind of tools in our toolboxes to encourage compliance. We've had fantastic support from our communities. The Commissioner has run a number of surveys throughout the pandemic around how it feels to our public in terms of how are their police doing around all of this. And our local position matches very much the BBC survey you may well have seen, which is that over 90% of our public are really supportive of the way they are being policed regarding the pandemic issue, which I think is, real testament to the people I lead, and is not an easy thing to achieve. And to give you a sense of where we're at, I mean, obviously the regulations changed once more a couple of weeks ago. We are finding when we turn up to things and ask people to go home, they pretty much largely are. So, our university students, we turn up, actually they're being hugely compliant. Where we need to have a word, they go home. We are not finding, real problems, but we're there. We've got what I call the COVID cars, dedicated officers and staff on overtime, because normal demand is at normal demand, who are doing the responding to the health calls as and when they need to. And largely, we are finding compliance, and you're hugely grateful to the public for doing that. This is about all of us keeping safe. Success is compliance. Success is not tickets, in my view. And people really are responding to that hugely well across all of our areas. But I said at the beginning, one of the things I was worried about when COVID struck us all was crime happening behind closed doors, where home was not the safest place. And what I feared would happen has happened. So now that young people are back at school, which is brilliant, we're getting an enormous uplift in children at risk that are now being notified, because of course the eyes and ears that schools so brilliantly offer, as well as other youth groups and other ways that young people have others who are looking out for them. When all that stopped and home isn't safe, people weren't spotting that. So we've seen over 50% increase in child at risk referrals over the last few weeks, which is not a surprise. And of course, with our partners, we are doing everything around that. So we are what I describe as a kind of steady state emergency in terms of the COVID regulations. We've got an organisation that is confident of doing what it's doing. It's busy, yes, but we're okay, and we are also genuinely benefiting, I think, from some very steady and regulation in our area, which is, of course, thanks to our infection rate being lower than many, and let's all hope, of course, that it stays that way, and that relies upon us all playing our part and adhering to those regulations. So one of the aspects, though, that is a concern from COVID, and it was on my worry list at the start, was the impact on the criminal justice system. And you'll be aware, before COVID came, there were concerns about it. A Royal Commission had been announced by the government because the criminal justice system is accepted by all, I think, to be creaking in many aspects. And so what COVID has done is really bring a focus onto those aspects. And I am really worried about it. And I'll give you a sense of where we are. So the criminal justice system is a long and complicated beast. Many of you may have seen, I hope, the Channel 4 series, Crime and Punishment, which was our whole local criminal justice partnerships agreed to do that film to show how complex criminal justice is, and how people who work within it are making really difficult judgments in many cases, much of which, of course, is often not in the public eye. But there are some reassurances. So at the point when the pandemic hit, to give you a sense of scale, we had just shy of 1,000 cases with our Crown Prosecution Service. That's a normal level for us, awaiting a charging decision, and they need to do their work on that. That's a normal level. That number has barely changed. It's still 1,000. So actually, in terms of the cases that we asked the CPS to look at, they are turning those round in exactly a really good pace, as they always were. That's not the same everywhere in the country. One of the reasons I think we have had a really good basis for that here is we have a mature, well-funded, much by the Commissioner, out-of-court disposal regime here. So if things don't need to go to the magistrates or the Crown Court, then they don't, but they have good, robust out-of-court disposals, whether that's, what other kind of resolution that would go on. So that has stood us in really, really good stead, and we know we get good public support for that. But there are other problems within it. So before the pandemic hit, again, to give you a sense of scale, we had 2,500 defendants who had been charged with the CPS's agreement and were either awaiting first hearing or sentencing or appeals or whatever else. Last week, that was up to nearly 5,000. So it's nearly doubled. And that is despite, and we do have really good partnerships with our courts, with our magistrates, with our judiciary, with our probation, all the different partners in this space. We have as good a partnership as any in our area of the country, and yet these are wicked problems and they're not getting unstuck very quickly. We have Stu Murray, who temporary ACC, who leads the recovery work in our region, but is also the National Police recovery lead as well. And the reason I encouraged and offered Stu, who is being paid for, by the way, elsewhere, to do that work, because I really wanted Hampshire to be around the table and influencing. And plus, we are really good at this, and we have a really good criminal justice system, and yet these are big problems and these are big backlogs. So the Crown Courts are opening, the Magistrates' Courts are opening, but it's the same for all of us, isn't it? Naturally, the flow through of those courts and their ability to deal with some of the larger trials with perhaps a number of defendants is inevitably hampered. It is understandable that it's difficult, but what that means is that when one would normally, if you were a victim of crime or a witness and expecting to go to court, and a defendant, because it impacts on them too, one would normally expect in normal times to be listing within a matter of weeks, perhaps a couple of months if pushed. We're now listing 1 year, 2 years hence. That delayed justice is a concern and should be a concern for all of us. We're working very closely with our prison. And, one thing that is the police's responsibility is looking after victims and witnesses as they prepare for their day in court. I am putting more resourcing into this, but again, to give you a sense of scale and to paint this picture, we have witness care officers. Their job is to, let the victim and also witnesses know what's happening in their case, what the dates are, prepare them for court and so on. Normally, a witness care officer would have about 100 cases that they're looking after. It's over 200 now. I'm putting more people in, don't worry, I'm not breaking those witness care officers, but it's just to give you a sense of what this means in practice for policing. And it is what it is. We are working fantastically with our partners, and we are doing everything we possibly can. But I am concerned about it, and I think the solution will be some way hence before we are back to what feels okay. Sticking with COVID and looking after our people, I said it at the top of the meeting. It's one of the most important things I do and should do as Chief Constable. And it is fair to say that it is rare in policing for things at home to bump into things at work at the same time. So, of course, I work with people who are policing, who are answering calls, who are victim care officers, who are in our custody blocks. They are parents of fresher students who are worried. They have got elderly parents elsewhere in the country they can't go and visit because of local lockdowns. We've got, of course, colleagues whose partners are being made redundant. So all the kind of real life stuff is very much bumping into work. And we've done that for 6 months. We know we'll be doing it for at least a further 6. So as their Chief Constable, I'm acutely aware of that. And my focus very much is on leading them well through this period. I am hugely grateful to the people I have the privilege to lead, and I'm humbled, genuinely humbled by their approach to serving their communities. I've had more people at work in this period than ever before. Our sickness and absence has been the lowest in the country consistently for huge chunks of it, and we've never gone, above the top 2 or 3 in terms of having people at work, and that goes hugely to the attitude of the people who serve our communities in this constabulary. The Commissioner has invested heavily over recent years in looking after our people, in well-being, and I'm really confident that that has paid off. None of us foresaw this pandemic at this scale, but I am really sure that that investment has helped very much keep people at work and keep their heads up. I'm really confident that that's happened. And our absence rate has kind of bubbled around the 2%, 2.5% all the way through, which is really good. So some specifics, and I will come to some of the specific questions as well that were raised. So personal protective equipment, there were some blips at the beginning. Getting hold of it, that was quickly ironed out from a combination of local supply with our local resilience forum partners, but also through national policing. We've got high confidence in it. We've got plenty of it. So that isn't something I worry about. We also took some very pragmatic steps, which weren't necessarily popular with colleagues, but our first objective was to, at the start, and continues to be, not to spread this disease. So we have a policy of single crewing. What that means is we're sending 2 cars with 1 person to a job where we used to send 2 people. That has impact on fleet and mileage and servicing and all of those things, but it's absolutely about keeping my officers safe, so they are safe themselves, but they're also not putting the public at risk either. So we did that right from the start, and I'm really glad that we did. We have dedicated cars who go to any suspected COVID sudden death, and we have, of course, the top level PPE for that, and that was, very quickly put in place with both our coroner's support, which I'm grateful for. We have looked at all of our estate. We have 82 buildings from which the constabulary works. We've gone through each and every one of those. They are COVID secure. I wish I'd got shares in Perspex. I think we probably all do. So the only thing we're waiting on is simply getting hold of Perspex. The commissioners released the money. It's coming. It's just taking as it takes, but we have got interim in there. But actually, a lot of it relies upon behaviour. We can all have the finest COVID secure estate, but if people aren't behaving properly and keeping safe within it, so a huge focus on people's behaviour, which I'm, genuinely very, very confident in. But we will keep that up. We can afford no complacency. Linked to that, working remotely. So about 10% of us, there's 5,000 paid people in the constabulary, and of course, over 1,000 volunteers, but from the paid people, about 10% work from home and only 1 day. And that's a combination of people who can work remotely entirely. So for instance, our IT department on day 1 work remotely. They're there, they've absolutely stayed there. Their productivity is fantastic, but that's a kind of department that could just do it. So they have. There are lots of other people, of course, who absolutely could never work remotely because they are public facing. That's detention officers, response officers, firearms officers, dogs, all those kind of people whose very nature of their job is in the public domain. So those people can't do that. And then there's a chunk in the middle who can do some and some. And of course, I'm asking some people to work remotely on occasion in order to keep the numbers in our various buildings to the safe numbers. So that's going fine. And we really ramped up our technology rollout. Our IT team really stepped up fantastically. So we brought forward very, very rapidly rollout of laptops and Microsoft Teams, and we will have everyone video enabled by the end of this calendar year. That's coming. We're bringing on about 250 people a week in terms of video enabled. But that will come by the end of the week and is obviously a huge enabler. But there's also been sorry.
Apologies, Chief Constable, for interrupting. Just to let you know, it's 10:59 and we'll be pausing at 11 o'clock.
Thank you. Yes, my alarm just went off on my phone to tell me the same. If I just finish very briefly then on this section, there has been a lovely personal touch as well. Clearly uniforms in the public eye. So some colleagues of Macro made bags out of old pillowcases for people to put their uniform in when they got home, so they didn't have to take their uniform into the home or put it straight in the washing machine. Very simple but effective things like that. And I'll pause there, Chair.
Chairman, you're currently muted.
Thank you. Shall we start 1 minute silence from now? Thank you, Chief Constable. Thank you, members, and thank you, the public, who I'm sure would have joined us. Carry on, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Caroline, for the reminder as well. So I'll turn to sticking with COVID and some of the specific questions. One of the questions that came was, have officers or staff received additional training or equipment? So absolutely they have during this pandemic. I've talked about personal protective equipment and the COVID cars to sudden deaths. We call them Operation Grayson cars, technology, but also being able to use their home devices to use our technology as well. So we've been able to do that through the Citrix network. And there was a period, which has now ceased, whereby we were assisting the courts with remote remand hearings, doing that from our cell block. That's now ceased, but there was obviously specific training around that. And in terms of the question, how has staff welfare been managed, and do I see additional demand upon them, upon staff services going forward? Yes, absolutely, I see more. Right from the start of COVID, as I said, staff wellbeing was one of those absolute top things I needed to do, both because it's right, but because I need people at work to serve the public. We've had a dedicated wellbeing bronze within our what we're calling Operation Mix, which is our COVID operational name, dedicated to that, and that has focused on everything from the nuts and bolts of home working, making sure everyone's got the kit they need at the right height, it's all safe, they can use it, but as well as isolation, and we've had real support from our 4 psychologists about mind shield and keeping well and keeping mental health well when people are feeling often very, very isolated. We've also given a lot of guidance out to managers. And we've got a pandemic toolkit. So that's everything surrounding bereavement, because of course, being bereaved in this period is a very difficult time for all of us who are suffering that. Those with caring responsibilities, with addictions, so on, the whole list there as a toolkit for managers to draw on. There was genuine fear, understandably, about being assaulted, and particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, being spat at, which was utterly disgusting and vile. It's horrible anyway. My staff will say they'd rather be punched in the face than spat at. But when COVID is with us, that makes that even more dangerous. So very grateful to magistrates. I wrote to them about 3 weeks ago now, thanking them, because our magistrates were fantastic for anyone who spat at any emergency worker, not just those in the police family. They were robust and they were swift at dealing with that, because it's a truly vile thing. But in terms of well-being, we offered hotel provision for those who had been assaulted in that way, who didn't want to take that home to their loved ones. If they wanted to, they could do their isolation in those early weeks in hotels if they wanted to. We've obviously done the specific risk assessments for those who are clinically vulnerable, extremely clinically vulnerable, and also for our colleagues who are Black and minority ethnic as well, very much, well, exactly on the lines that the NHS did and advised us to do. And we've also done a lot about physical well-being. So we've done frontline fitness. One of our very fit response officers has done a whole kind of load of Instagram channel stuff about keeping fit and various kinds of programs for people, as well as nutrition. And we were going to do part of our wellbeing offer was going to be in person this autumn. We couldn't do that, so we shifted that to nutrition and some really great kind of food offerings and options and also menus and things out to operational staff. We're opening our gyms slowly when it was safe to do so. We're doing that. And our occupational health, they've been fantastic and are working remotely, phone call appointments, but they're calling back within 2 days at the moment. So really good, swift service there as well. There's another question regarding, have any regular policing activities been curtailed? At the beginning, yes. As I say, now we're very much back at normal business. But at the beginning, Speed Watch was curtailed, largely because there weren't very many people on the roads, if you remember, back at that point. But we also, but that's now back up and running. Project Gateway, which is our interventions for offenders 18 to 24 years old, that was delayed, now up and running. I've talked about how we used Facebook to do our beat surgeries, but because of course they had to stop, but they're now up and running, albeit in a different way, but we have got that real world contact going on. And then in terms of another question, which was around court backlog and criminal justice, I think I've answered that one in full in my other presentation. So I think that's the COVID aspect, other than the forward look. So we have a reset and recovery program. I said at the beginning of my remarks that I don't want us to go back to where we were. I want us to head towards where we want to be. So we've got a very extensive reset and recovery program, and it's got three main strands to it. One of which has been a kind of a debrief in the normal sense of, you know, we've done this, we've moved very quickly as policing always does. What have we learned? You know, how would we do this differently? What do we need to tweak? So we've done that. But then more broadly, we're working with Portsmouth University, as well as through some of the national policing research about what is going to be different about the public's demand of us. We know when there's a recession that there are socioeconomic impacts which impact upon vulnerability and the impact on crime. So what does that mean for us? So we're doing that thinking. But also the third element is about our organisational resilience beyond the COVID period. It's everything from estate to technology to our attitude to home working and our appetite for that. What do we do about vulnerable groups? What do we do about kind of flexible demand and resource planning? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. And of course, you know, one of the things that has been remarkable has been our ability to productively work remotely. And that has been great. And of course, what that means is we need to decide, you know, what's our appetite into the future anyway to do that. Because one of the things it can absolutely offer is a much greater, making us, you know, another way of us being a much more inclusive employer. So there's lots of benefits that come from that as well. But we're working through a whole reset and recovery program as we go. We're not obviously waiting for the end. We're building things iteratively, but it's a really big focus for us. So that, Chairman, is the COVID aspects. And I can turn on to the next slide, if I may, Caroline, which is around funding risks. And I'll start, though, with the, you know, COVID costs, if you like, as well. But in terms of where we are on the funding and the current risks around that, and James touched on it in his remarks, as did the Commissioner. So in this current year, we expect an outturn at the end of March to be, you know, pretty much break even. At the moment, we're modelling on an outturn of an underspend of just shy of £1 million. That's very tight for us. There are COVID costs. Of course, we are reliably informed that we will be receiving the money for our PPE. We've had written confirmation from the Home Office along those lines. And the other reason we're having such a tight outturn underspend is we are expecting to be 99 police officers over establishment at the end of March. And I know one of the questions has been, where's the strength? What's the difference between strength and establishment? So we have our establishment, which is, if you like, the numbers of officers and staff we can pay for. You know, what does our budget allow, and where should we be hitting? But of course, people leave and get recruited not in an even line, so you kind of fluctuate around that establishment line, and that fluctuation is your strength. So if you like, in terms of recruiting people, the end of March is an arbitrary date. So we are bringing people in with the Commissioner's blessing as fast as we can, and I'll come on to uplift. And it just means that the arbitrary date at the end of the financial year, we've got 99 more than we have got the budget for. But as soon as we flip over and we start increasing with our next year's numbers of uplift, then of course that gets smoothed out. So if you like, the way to view it is establishment is what we can afford, and we've stated we can afford, but the strength is how that fluctuates over time. As of the beginning of September, in terms of COVID costs, our costs are 1.2 million. So some of that is PPE, some of that's overtime, some of that's, you know, more technology, those kind of things. But we've also got quite a lot of lost income. And the lost income relates to two things in the main. One is driver awareness training. So that's where you get offered a course if you are speeding within a certain bandwidth. And of course, you pay for that. And then that money gets reinvested into driver road safety initiatives. And of course, people weren't driving. So that went down. We will absorb that and bring that back in from, you know, that financial stream over time. We will just build that back in. It'll be recoverable. The other significant lost income is ACRO. You'll know that ACRO is housed by Hampshire Constabulary, and is where all of the significant numbers of transactional information sharing across nations goes on, often by charities, big companies who've got workers who they want to work abroad, and they need to show that they've got a clean bill of health, if you like, from UK law enforcement, as well as foreign nationals and foreign national offenders coming back the other way. And of course, people stopped travelling, and so that dried up almost instantly. And we're working on that. It has its own reserves. It's governed by a mixture of our own Police and Crime Commissioner and us in the Constabulary, but also it is a partnership across all policing. So that is covered. And it is worth mentioning at this point that ACRO, when the pandemic struck, offered themselves up fantastically to administer all of the fixed penalty notices regarding the health regulations. They stepped in, created a system that didn't exist anywhere at all before. They've done it brilliantly. They have been fantastic in terms of the transparency of all of those notices. And of course, now around the country, we've got a number of different sets of laws. I was talking to ACRO's chief executive only this morning about it, and they are absorbing all of that in a very impressive way. But it is a huge amount of work. Again, within the Constabulary leading on that. Our COVID costs overall are starting to trend down, but as I've said, we have got now these dedicated COVID cars who are going to the health calls every day. And when I set that up, when the regulations changed a fortnight ago, I'm very clear that what we started a fortnight ago, we must be able to sustain. So my intention is, as long as the ask is there, the demand is there, we will absolutely keep doing that. Of course, it has cost. But with all of that, the investment in well-being, we have kept people at work. We have got people at work. They are, that has really reaped huge rewards for us. So a fantastic investment, which we can really see the benefits from. As we look ahead in terms of funding, a snapshot, very much, of course, the budget is for the Commissioner, and he absolutely does listen to my advice operationally as he forms the budget and brings that to this panel. We are, as a Constabulary, hand in glove with the Commissioner's Office, developing our medium-term financial strategy. There are a number of, growth submissions into that strategy. 7 million of them are mandatory. They're everything from, strengthening our scrutiny of trying to get my language right. Strengthening our scrutiny of kind of a lot of our. I'll come back to it. I've completely lost my words. I will come back to it. I'm confusing myself. But so mandatory costs, but all, and also some other mandatory costs are things like, our SARC for sexual offences, that kind of thing. So there are £7 million worth of things we just have to do by law. We don't have a choice. And then there are others beyond that. But we're discussing with the Commissioner and his team over the coming months what that looks like. There are some big items in there that we know for now. Police officers pay award, 2.5%, very welcome for my officers, of course, and we fully anticipate 2.5% pay award from the same date in September for staff. And of course, most of our budget is officer and staff pay. And to remind you, 60% of our funding is government grant, and the other 40% is council tax. And that's the dilemma that of course, the Commissioner works through. And many of you work in local authorities, so you'll know this too, that we do expect a council tax deficit this year. We know we can repay that over 3 years, but we do expect the council tax base to reduce next year as well. So, the preset position is currently unknown for us, and that very much is a huge factor in how we plan for future financial years. Nationally, regarding financing, the National Police Chiefs Council, as well as the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, have submitted a single spending review submission that's gone into the Home Office, and that then goes into the Treasury. And we know that inflation is running between 0% and 1%, and of course, police officer pay probably staff to 2.5%. So you can see how those two things don't match. But the officer uplift, we do expect to be fully funded, and that includes all the on costs that go with them. So everything from, estates to uniforms and everything else. So we do anticipate that continuing to be funded. but we expect the rest of the financial issue to be very challenging indeed. But we will, we have as good a planning team as ever to plan for that, and whatever those eventualities are, we will absolutely do. But that doesn't mean to say that we can, as a result of that, deliver all the policing that I would want to deliver. And I know, hearing from the deputation, of course, that communities absolutely want. There is a disconnect between those two, and I will do my absolute utmost operationally to spread our people and our effort and our endeavours across all the different aspects of the policing mission. But it isn't straightforward, and I know that that leaves people disappointed, which I always regret, and I always just try and explain. One thing that does seem unlikely is a review of the funding formula coming anytime soon. I'm not expecting that. It's something we should all please keep in our minds, as the Commissioner said in his remarks, but I'm not confident that will be coming anytime soon. So that's where we are on the funding. And it does lead me very much onto the next slide, if I may, regarding uplift. And I'm conscious of time. How am I doing for time, Chairman?
You're doing very well. You're covering a lot of areas. Obviously, our rough time scale is a break about 11:30.
Okay, I should be fine for that. Thank you. So uplift. 3 weeks ago, I was at Southwark Park up on the hill and welcomed 91 new constables. We've got a fantastic partnership with the military up at Southwark Park and with Portsmouth University, who are our partner that we are delivering the new training with. But being in the officers' mess with 91 very spaced out new constables, with all of their tutors and trainers and the logistics people who've made that happen, was just brilliant. And I have asked NARPO and our History Society, when was the last time we recruited at that level? And no one's come up with an answer yet. So it must be a very, very long time ago. So it was absolutely brilliant to see them there. They're not the end, they are the first of our big cohorts. And one of the brilliant things about the new training, which is a degree apprenticeship as well as degree holder entry program, is that we can recruit at scale. And without that new form of training, which I'm a real fan of, it means that people get a degree for their professional development in the way that they always did that development, but they didn't get the recognition for it. It means we can do it at scale, which is just brilliant. And it's a very good operation that we've got going on at Southwark Park. It was lovely to welcome them. But they're far from the only ones, and many more are joining over the coming months as well, which is hugely exciting. And if I can go on to the next slide, which is the 6 areas of focus. This is my 4th strategy, which I've had in place for 4 years, having due regard, of course, to the Commissioner's Police and Crime Plan. This is the strategy I have and has stood us in very good stead across the constabulary. Of course, as the Commissioner has said, one would expect that I would be revising this year in a different Police and Crime Commissioner's tenure. That's not happening. So I've absolutely had due regard to the Commissioner's revised plan himself. And I've also changed only one section, which is the highlighted one there. And I've added, it used to have in it the College of Police and Code of Ethics. What I knew from feedback is people couldn't recite them. They weren't being unethical. They just didn't kind of know what those were. And I really wanted to focus more after the events of this summer. So I've changed that 6th area of focus to being ethical and inclusive of all. It's the first time in 4 years I've changed it at all. And it's not because we're not doing lots of it already. We are. And I'm very confident in that. But because this summer has shown me that in policing, like all of us in public service, we need to do more. The real focus over the summer on Black Lives Matters, and of course, this is Black History Month that we are in right now. You know, what was very clear, it was a real moment of reflection for me. I've been in policing a very, very long time. I grew up with my policing in Bristol. I understand the history of that city and how delicate that policing is. And we all saw the events there with the statue. And of course, what happens in the US, it affects us here, our communities here, because I know that what our communities think is happening from a policing perspective in a completely different part of the world and different jurisdiction absolutely impacts on how they feel about their policing in the UK. And we ignore that at our peril. I'm very confident that we tried to and were successful at treading a very nuanced path. We had a number of Black Lives Matter protests over the summer and marches, over 40 of them. We had independent scrutiny. We invited people in to come and see how we are policing that, because of course our job is to facilitate lawful protests in our democracy and to keep everyone safe. And all credit to the organisers of each of those protests and marches, because they worked with us really constructively and were quite rightly able to have their voice heard. But it does mean, my reflection is that I need to do even more work, both within the constabulary and very much without as well. And that's about the procedural justice, if you like, for the policing we deliver, but also the organisational justice for within the organisation too. We have been doing so much, but this summer has shown me I need to ramp that up even more. And that means lots more explaining, lots more data sharing, lots more transparency. I am proud that we are, as an organisation, as transparent as we are, but it's still not enough. I know that and I hear that. And we are not afraid to hold the mirror up to ourselves and deal with what we find. Not all organisations do that. This one absolutely does. And I've had a phrase which I've used for years, and I may have shared with you before, which is that we are transparent even when it hurts. It's the right thing to do for policing here. It's the right thing to do for this constabulary, because we can only deliver our policing if we have the permission and the confidence of the public we serve. It's right at the bedrock of 200 years of British policing. So sticking with uplift, and in terms of taking every last bit out of this opportunity to increase the workforce in a once in many generations way, I believe. So very much, and I said before about, yes, we'll get the officers in, but let's take every opportunity to make us representative of the communities we serve. And that's a challenge I've set my organisation to do it. Very grateful to Assistant Chief Constable Craig Dibden, who has led this work. He's now handed over to Assistant Chief Constable Lucy Hudson. And we are well on the way to doing that. So in the pipeline of people coming in to us, for police officers, we're over 12% Black and minority ethnic group, which is above what our population is. ONS tell us our population is about 10%. We're waiting, of course, on the census next year to get the final figure, but we have worked with them and asked them to give the best view, which is 10%. So we're ahead of that in terms of the pipeline right now. I am determined that for all the new people who are joining us, we will achieve that. So far this year, in terms of recruitment, we've recruited 196 officers. Most of those are new officers. We do also have a healthy path of transferees from other forces who want to come and work in our brilliant area and in our brilliant constabulary. And therefore, by the end of March, in 21, we will have brought on a further 413. So we are way ahead of the recruitment that we needed, both to replace people leaving and to grow by that 156 that is our chunk, the first year chunk of the national 20,000. I still don't have my numbers of year 2 or year 3 in terms of that 20,000. It does mean, as I've said earlier, we'll be ahead of ourselves by the end of March, but as I say, this is an enduring recruitment process for the full 3 years. And actually, all those new student officers are deployed into local policing initially. One thing that isn't happening, though, is an additional uplift nationally regarding police staff. There was talk of that when the 20,000 was first announced. That has now gone off the agenda. But what it does mean, by having improved all of our recruitment pathways, that we can bring in detention officers, contact management, PCSOs, etc., and keep those numbers up where they need to be. The next slide, which you've seen before, this is where the additional neighbourhood officers are being allocated. You've had this information before, but I would really urge members of the panel to remember these are the neighbourhood team officers. They are crucial. They are vital. We maintain the British neighbourhood policing model very, very preciously here in Hampshire, but that's not where all of your policing comes from. You have response colleagues, you have force assets such as armed response and roads policing and dogs. We have regional, and a really good example, only overnight, last night in Eastleigh, we've had a car stolen with some very valuable personal possessions in it. We stopped them and we caught them, but that involved the response officers. It involved, of course, contact management. It involved armed response, roads policing, dogs, helicopters, and Surrey. You know, that is how a local incident in Eastleigh is resolved. So please, I would really encourage you to think more broadly and understand that your policing in your own community comes from that much wider service. And you will have seen, I hope, National County Lines Intensification Week a couple of weeks back. You know, that is everything from us with British Transport Police, from the National Crime Agency, from the Regional Organised Crime Unit and neighbourhood teams. It's such a normal way of policing now, that happens, you know, all the time. So in terms of the questions, I just want to make sure, in terms of uplift, if we can go on to the next slide, that I've covered off all of those. I think, Chairman, I've answered all your questions. If I haven't, I'm sure someone will remind me. But if I stop there, conscious of time, those are kind of the remarks I wanted to share with you, hopefully useful. And of course, very happy to take questions from anyone.
Well, first of all, can I thank you for a most comprehensive and reassuring briefing, an overview of the police response to COVID-19. But not only that, I think also how you're ensuring general policing response continues to keep Hampshire and the Isle of Wight safe. I think I'm sure all members would join me in thanking you for your presentation on that. Very, very, very comprehensive, and for me fully justifies the invitation today so that you could give us that level of briefing. We've got, that's the first thing I wanted to say on behalf of members. Obviously, normally where you hear the Commissioner would now do a response, but I'm hoping James will be happy to limit that, extremely limited, like just to acknowledge your presentation. What I'm going to propose, James, if James is there, is I will read to you some questions that we had for the Commissioner, which, if you're happy to take them away without response and send us a written response, would be a sensible way forward, if that's all right. So, yeah, just repeating, thank you very much, Chief Constable. You might want to listen to the questions that I'm about to read, and then we will all break for a... James, I see the nod of approval. So these will be sent to you in writing, but for the public that are listening, because I think it's important they understand that the Police and Crime Panel does fulfil its scrutiny of the Police and Crime Commission a range of ways, one of which is to ask questions which the Commissioner can then answer publicly, but we'll get them done in the way I've described. So the questions we're going to ask are, how is the Police and Crime Commissioner working with the criminal justice partners to address the pressures on central agencies? That point you raised, Chief Constable, around the backlog in court cases resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. How has COVID-19 affected delivery of the budget and the current reserves held? Although you have alluded to that, it's just understanding, because in January we will be considering the precept, as you know. How have you worked with partners to coordinate responses to the pandemic across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight? So that's for the Commissioner. What challenges were met in communicating with partners during this time, and how have they been overcome? Why have meetings with the Community Safety Partnership Managers been put on hold since the outbreak, and what options are being explored to hold these virtually? Has there been any impact on road safety measures during the pandemic? And you did actually allude, Chief Constable, to the fact that people off the road reduces that. For example, our road safety mobile cameras now operating and have driver training courses resumed without missed attendance, so you mentioned that. It's widely recognised that domestic abuse is likely to have increased and intensified during the pandemic. So how has the Commissioner considered the potential financial impact resulting from increased future demand or support services? What is the purpose of the CPI forms? And has the Commissioner discussed with you, the Chief Constable, how the force are ensuring an appropriate and timely response to reports of crime made through them? Has there been any noted increase in antisocial behaviour resulting from a reduction in availability of diversionary activities and school closures? And how has the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner worked with providers to enable such services to remain operational through the pandemic. And then finally on this section, how has the Police and Crime Commissioner maintained a visible presence with local communities when face-to-face contact opportunities are clearly reduced? So those are the questions that will be sent to the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, and James has already agreed that we'll get a written response. Actually, a number of elements in there you, as I say, covered in your presentation, Chief Constable, so we really do appreciate that. And I think at this stage, if everybody's happy, we'll take a 10-minute break to allow members comfort break, and then we will resume on item 8, which will be the Police and Crime Commissioner annual report. So thank you, members. Thank you, Chief Constable, and thank you, members of the public. Stay with it. We'll be back in 10 minutes.
The webcast is resumed.
Thank you. Welcome back, members of the public, to the Police and Crime Panel meeting. My colleagues are all on the call and the Chief Constable is still with us, but I expect she'll be interested in hopefully some of the topics that we cover. We're going to move to item 8 now, which is the annual report of the Police and Crime Commissioner. James, are you doing a presentation to us, or I've got a number of questions for you?
Chair, I've just really got a few words to say by way of introduction rather than a full presentation, because the report's there in draft. So
yes,
if I may, first of all, I'd just like to say it's been really good to have the Chief Constable with us this morning, and we've seen such huge progress in terms of the 156 officers that the government have sponsored, but the Chief Constable also recruited the additional 94 to get ahead of the target that we've set ourselves. And part of the briefing that we gave members this week was that we've seen less officers leaving over this last year, and so we've got another 99 over establishment, as the Chief has said, and so it's great to see for the first time in such a very long time numbers of police officers within the organisation. And so it's been a good year so far, and credit to Olivia and the team for the amount of work they put in to see such a large cohort of 91 officers coming through the process. And that 91 officers is a small group of Olivia, I think 600 officers that we've seen come through the process this year, which is a tenfold increase on what we would normally see. So fantastic work from the team. And as you know, we continue to work hard across the communities, across the Hampshire police area, focusing on supporting our BME communities. And it was good to hear from the Chief again the significant impact she's seeing in terms of recruitment in these communities. Again, we should be really encouraged. The Chief also took the opportunity, in line with the PCC reviewing the plan this year, to look at her 6 areas of focus, and for the first time has changed one of those, or enhanced one, to make sure that we're looking at the ethical behaviour of people in the organisations. And you'll be aware that there's been an ongoing investigation into misconduct in Hampshire Constabulary, a matter that the PCC considers of the utmost importance and continues to scrutinise the Chief closely regarding this matter. And further information regarding the process of this investigation and the misconduct hearings will be publicly available by Hampshire Constabulary this afternoon. And so it's just to make sure that we bring that to your attention. And COVID remains a challenge for us all, especially in the office, and we've worked hard to support the constabulary as they've worked hard to maintain public confidence using the 4 E's, as the Chief has spoken about. And it is with grateful thanks to the Chief for taking time today. She has very busy days to keep us all safe, and so it's just been great to have her here with us and to be able to respond to your questions. So if I may, Chair, I'm just going to go on to speak briefly about the annual report. And it's unusual for a commissioner to be able to endorse a 4th annual report, because by now we would normally be sitting here with a new Police and Crime Commissioner. And so my thanks to our Commissioner and his announcements for the support he's given to the team who put the annual report together for him. And over the past year, we've been able to see how the Commissioner's projects have built and culminated in keeping people safer over the past 4 years. And it demonstrates how the Commissioner has continued to work hard to reach into and to engage with all the communities he serves. This is clearly evidenced through last year's budget consultation, one of a number of consultations, and we reached the highest number of local residents of any PCC in the country. Michael continues to focus on keeping you, your family and your community safer, and this has remained his mission throughout. And you'll recall the Police and Crime Plan has 4 strategic pillars that support this mission, and each has equal status. They define all the activity delivered over the last year and shape the structure of this 4th annual report. This year's annual report will again be fully digitally produced, which not only saves us money, but continues to be the best way to make this information available to as many people as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, you're currently muted.
Thank you. So first, I'll say it again. Thank you very much, James, for your concise and overview there. We've got a series of questions which various members of the panel will now ask, and then we'll take them as they come. So I'll first turn to Ken Mershamp from Rushmore, who has a question.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning, James. And I'm not sure you'll want to answer this, or if it would become written answer or whatever. But bearing in mind the deputation we had this morning, and the Commissioner's mission of your community safer, your family safer, and you safer, how have you assessed the impact of the projects and services that have been funded in keeping residents safer, and how well can Hampshire's residents witness that effect for themselves?
Chair, you happy to answer these one at a time?
Happy for you to answer one at a time. There may be a supplementary off your response.
Okay, so firstly, because the Commissioner's not here, I did promise him that I wouldn't go into lots and lots of detail, and that we'll happily provide further written information to the questions, but just in terms of the headlines, particularly to do with the services we commission first, that we clearly define what we want the outcomes to be, and then we review all of the services that are commissioned against those, and the team regularly review progress against those, hence we're able to produce the annual report, which gives then detail, but we're happy to pull together some further evidence and offer that back to you to show the analysis we do against those.
Okay, thank you. Ken, if you're happy, I'll move on to the next question. Yeah. So this is a question from Councillor James Bradley from Hart, and in relation to the report, for the record, it refers to page 16 to James.
Thank you very much. So if we actually consider that page, we interviewed a large number of people were referred for help and support, but actually only 2,000 odd actually got processed and handled. Is it possible to explain what the discrepancy is? Why do so many people get reported for victim support, but so few actually go on and actually receive that support?
Thank you for your question. We support everybody who asks for it. So that's just nice and straightforward. So we contact everyone, but what you'll see is that not everybody comes back to us and says, yes, please, I'd like to go further into the system, but we offer to support to everybody who requests it.
Good. And so are they actively encouraged to seek that support?
Absolutely.
And they understand what the benefit would be if they were to engage with the system?
Absolutely, they do. We go into a lot of detail about what it's there for. It's you'll see Olivia nodding, because it's something that we do all together, that officers have the opportunity to signpost people into this system, and we've actually supported hundreds of thousands of people over the last 8 years. We'd like to see the numbers increase. Thank you for noting that sort of there aren't as many people that would take up that support, and it's an encouragement to us to continue to work to make sure that we're clear in terms of what we offer, but we do offer support to everybody who requests it.
And I think that's a recognition. I think we as a panel realise that the support of victims is actually a very important part of the entire criminal justice system. So I'm glad that there's cohesion across all sides on that one. So thank you.
I made myself just to follow up. Sorry, I made myself a note because I was really interested in terms of the people, the deputies, and what they had to say, that they felt that they were victims of crime and that somebody hadn't followed them up. And I made a note to myself and thought, do you know, our victim care service is available. I wonder how we offered it to them. So part of our analysis and our response will be to go back and look at that.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
have
Jen.
had a similar thought, so thank you.
Well done, thank you. Our next question, which relates to paragraph 20, page 26, item 12, is from Diane Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. James, the report notes that 83% of offenders taking part in the restorative justice have not reoffended. Now, how does this compare with those who did not participate?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure I can immediately respond to it. We'll make sure we pick that up and cover that up in detail for you.
Thank you. And out of interest, are the offenders able to access this during this COVID time?
The answer is yes. This is last year's annual report, so obviously the different world, different scenario. Commissioners committed quite a significant amount of money to supporting all of the different areas that we offer, so that they could move where this is a face-to-face service. We paid additional money to these services to be able to go digital, so that they can continue to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question, which is going to come actually from Ken again. It refers to page 34, brackets 20. Ken?
Thank you once again, Chairman. Yes, James, can you, what level of response has been received from residents in raising questions to be addressed at Compass meetings, and how is this opportunity being promoted, please?
Compass is a really valuable opportunity, public opportunity for the PCC and the Chief Constable to have a conversation. And what we've done over the last year is we've started to significantly change the way we go about briefing the PCC and the Chief Constable through the office. And so we've started to work on bringing all the items that Michael gets in his post bag, either from members of the public, and some of those channels actually come through the MPs, and so there are questions brought up in MP surgeries that they write to us on, that we then bring to the attention of the Chief Constable through that session. And so the MPs are aware of Compass, and so we get information from their surgeries. We also actually go out through our network to make sure people are aware that Compass is happening, and obviously then all the people that write with queries that we can factor into Compass through the PCC's post bag. So we do our best. If your concern is that it's not visible enough, then we'd welcome your support too. If you get questions and queries from your communities, then please do feed them through to us, because we've started to change the way we use Compass to surface public issues through the different avenues and the different streams of people's post bags in their communities.
Gotcha. I've just had experience recently from a neighbourhood watch group who wish to be more involved in that area. So I don't know if communication goes out to that channel currently, but certainly in the area that I'm looking at, that would be useful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now move to Lisa Griffiths, which is a further question regarding learning through innovation and sharing. Lisa.
Hi, James. Good morning. The report outlines a number of successful and innovative approaches that were taken there last year. How are these successes being shared with other PCCs for adoption nationally?
Good question. The way in which the way in which PCC share information is done broadly through the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. As to how active we are in sharing, I'll be honest, as officers we talk about our successes and share with each other. I'll dig in a bit deeper to see how Michael's been sharing his successes back through his PCC network and give you a better written answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's always nice to have the Chief Executive in unprepared, because then he gives honesty completely. Not that we don't get honesty normally, but that was a very honest response. Thank you. If I move now to the next question, which is from Tonya Craig Eastley.
Thank you, Chair. Last year, the panel suggested that the Commissioner include an executive summary to the beginning of the report to make it more accessible to the wider public. Do you have any plans to incorporate something similar this year?
Thank you for your question. And yes, absolutely, we do. What we do, and we have done every year, is we provide you the very first draft, which has the content of the report, but it isn't the published report. It comes to you first so that we can pick up your concerns and any questions you have so we can improve the report. And so from your questions today and the written response that we give you, those will be added into the report, and then we'll be doing a much more public friendly version with the pictures, with a short executive summary that highlights the things that the public would be interested in. And so again, your help and support and encouragement and identification of things in the annual report that you feel we ought to bring to the public's attention, the executive summary, would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a supplement on that one, just as to when we're expecting that draft report so that we can feed into it, please?
We work on it during this month of October, ready for publishing in November. So you have over the next 4 weeks to contribute to that.
Okay, I think that probably naturally follows into the next question, which is from Councillor Warwick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, James. It does follow on, actually. It's really nice to see that you've gone digital with the report. I guess we're past the days of leaving copies in doctor surgeries and in libraries. But how do you ensure that this digital report reaches the public in that sort of general way? And then how do you follow up on any feedback or interaction with that report from the public? I know that you send it to councillors and community safety partnerships, but how do you ensure that sort of wider reach, if you like?
So the public engagement team that we have test carefully the products that we put out into the digital world. They look at the numbers of times, numbers of hits. They look at the sort of demographics that are looking at it. We have in the past used advertising through Facebook and then targeted advertising to areas of the population that we don't feel are accessing the sort of things that we would offer to them. We also choose carefully to make sure that we offer the product to our MPs. Michael's very particular around how he communicates with the leaders of councils, with his MPs, to make sure that they're aware, so that particularly the MPs, as they go back to their communities, have this available. And also what it does is it tunes the council tax leaflet that we put out in January, and we like to signpost back to, as you can see here, our website through there, where we put the annual report front and center for people to look at. So in a digital world, we're trying to use and signpost people to our website. We've recently updated our website. We're also, as I'm sure your councils have, had to look very carefully at accessibility for your website and the sort of products that we're making available. And so the annual report ends up being at the top of the page and being advertised over the coming months, again being signposted at every opportunity we can. So you'll find the annual report here next month, and also then to look at the detail of that when we publish the budget in January, and then the council tax leaflet as it goes out in March and April.
Thank you, James. I think I've got one more question from Councillor Simon Bound, if I take that now.
Thank you, Chair. The PCC has given 16,000 to support actions around rural crime, which is welcome. Can the PCC explain what and how he is working with the constabulary to lower rural crime rates?
So just recently, you'll be aware that ACC Maggie Blythe has joined the constabulary, and Maggie's taken over local policing. Rural crime sits within her portfolio, and we've been discussing how to come again to the issues we find in rural crime. And the 16,000 is allocated very specifically to focus on and bring in an analyst who's dedicated to understanding rural criminality. It was something that the chair of the strategic independent advisory group came to us and lobbied Michael quite hard that he felt that better intelligence products for the Country Watch team might help focus the attention on tackling some specific changes happening in rural crime. And so that's where that money will go, to support the chief in identifying specialist analysts within rural crime to try to improve the outcomes that we get for our rural communities.
Thank you, James. I think the Commissioner probably understands that lots of our rural communities currently feel quite neglected by him personally.
I think that's a statement more than a question, but the point's been noted. Thank you for that, Sir Simon. So, James, I think that's all the prepared questions that I have from members. I'm just going to check that I haven't missed anybody. I'll go via Caroline. Is there anybody who's got their hand up that I haven't asked, Caroline?
Councillor Beavis, did you have a question?
No, Chairman, it's a statement, really. I was just pleased to see the success of the Cyber Ambassador scheme and to read in the report that they've engaged with over 15,000 individuals. And I think that is really important. I congratulate the team on doing that. Thank you.
And my thanks for that, Councillor Beavis. We've recently recruited a secondary schools worker to extend the reach of the Cyber Ambassador scheme. It's been recognised by Amazon and by Cisco and by Microsoft as being a leading product for keeping children safer online. Can you believe that? Something that we generated here in Hampshire has been recognised internationally by some of the biggest people in the industry, and they've asked to join to help us. And so my thanks for your kind words regarding that. It's something that we are really and rightly proud of in terms of the work the Commissioner has sponsored to move that forwards and keeping our young people safe. And who would know how important that was going to be last year, when this year all of those young people are having to live their lives even more online. And so fantastic work by the team and lots of young people kept safer as a consequence.
Thank you, John, for the comment. Thank you, James, for the response. So members, I'll read the recommendation and then look for somebody to second it. This is that the panel receives the draft annual report of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire, reviews the document and makes any report or recommendation to the Commissioner which is in line with section 28.4 of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act. Can I have just a hand to show a second on that one? Simon Bound, thank you very much. So could members indicate if they wish to abstain, first of all, and I'll ask Caroline to monitor. So I've got no abstention. Is there anybody who doesn't support the recommendation? If you could show now. Thank you. And then those in favour of the report, if you wouldn't mind showing, perhaps coming off mute and saying so, just so the public appreciate we're here. So I'm very happy.
Agree. Support.
Agree. Chair. Agree.
Agree. So that's very good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Finally, we move on to item 9. So this is the Police and Crime Commissioner Police and Crime Plan Delivery. And we'll receive an update from James, just detailing the delivery against his Police and Crime Plan. And then I'll invite the chairman of the Plan Working Group if he has any comments to make, and then members beyond that. And then we'll go to the recommendation, which is basically that we will note the report. So James, back to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And in terms of this item for plan delivery, in March, the Commissioner updated his police and crime plan to take into account the exceptional times in which we find ourselves, and to ensure policing and beyond into the criminal justice sector have a clear strategic direction as we continue to respond to the challenges of COVID-19. And I'd like to bring a few key points to your attention of the work that's happened over the last 3 months. So in terms of COVID-19, to sustain and support key areas of vulnerability and risk by funding projects under the Safer Communities Fund to support communities of Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth, Southampton, just keeping us safer, and to provide support to the community that is affected by COVID-19. We've run 13 projects that have responded to vulnerable young people and helped divert them from offending, as well as supporting victims of crime. Commissioners also run 2 safer rounds, and in the office we call them the 500 words commissioning rounds, because what we do is we ask people to just come up with a short 500 word thereabouts statement that recommends the Commissioner a very low level of investment, but as we all know that you can make a little bit of money go a very long way in terms of the local prevention. So support, CCTV systems, information to keep people safer. All of these things have come through the office, and Michael has supported in terms of keeping those very local communities and those very local endeavours safer. Also supporting communities across the whole of our area. The Commissioner's now opened a third round of our Keeping Our Communities Fund. In response to the significant bid that was won for safer communities for Southampton, we had an awful lot of requests from across the Hampshire area saying, but what about us? You know, we weren't successful, but how do we keep our community safer? And so that round is open now. It's open to all of you and all of your communities to bid to the Commissioner for a sum of £500 to make a very local investment to help keep our streets safer. It's always been our ambition to create a single access point to many of the services that we provide, and we focus particularly in on a number of questions you've asked today about domestic abuse, but also sexual crime, and there is a significant change to the way we want to commission those services, and so you'll see some services have been extended rather than recommissioned, and this is because we're trying to get the timing of all of these contracts in terms of the renewal together, so that we can create a single access point for victims, a single referral point for our colleagues across the constabulary and healthcare to be able to refer people into the services that are provided for both victims of domestic abuse and sexual crime. I mentioned that we were successful in a £550,000 Safer Streets Fund bid for the residents of Bargate in Southampton, and that work is now underway in terms of the investment there. I think back in terms of the deputation this morning and the ask around, so what is happening about keeping the residents of Southampton safer? Michael asked me just to remind you that was a significant investment, and then a further significant investment into keeping the Bitton police station so that we can keep those communities safer, that we have somewhere for the Chief Constable to deploy her additional officers to, and that was felt as being the right interaction. We're going further to think about where next in Portsmouth, because in terms of the deployment of officers, you will have seen from the Chief Constable and the list she gave you that the most significant numbers are coming forward in the two cities, and we want to make sure that we can accommodate those officers appropriately. Michael's very keen to make sure that his key decisions make sure that there aren't any cliff edges, and he has in his mind next year's elections, a new police and crime commissioner, and remembers in his first 6 months how challenging it is to commission services, to understand the needs of the communities, to think about the support that the Chief Constable needs. And so he's trying to create a landscape where the next commissioner has the opportunity to make decisions, but also that those people who have services commissioned and are providing that support for victims, for witnesses and for others in our community aren't struggling with that cliff edge, and so the commissioner can then make effective, timely decisions. A number of you will also be aware that in the last quarter, the officers worked hard to develop forums for greater transparency and to provide better support for diverse communities across our area. Enzo Riglia, my Deputy Chief Exec, is leading a significant piece of work to look at police legitimacy, particularly in reference to our Black and Afro-Caribbean communities. And I've sought to make inroads into a more effective joint approach to responding to the needs of our Gypsy, Roma, Traveller communities. And we welcome the panel in next step in terms of the Equality and Diversity Working Group, and look forward to engaging with you. So I'm keeping it brief. So in summary, whilst in lockdown and with all the staff working digitally, we've had a hugely successful first 6 months of the new plan, and a really impactful quarter in terms of the work we've done in this exceptional year. And we continue to deliver the police and crime plan priorities, and my thanks to the plan working group for the help and support that they've been giving to us with this. And we now turn our focus to budget setting for the next year. and you'll all know the challenges we face. And I personally am looking forward again to the work that we do, and particularly having the forum of the Finance Working Group and the work that Michael Coombs and the team do that gives such essential support to me in testing the scenarios we look at. So just in terms of my piece, to finish with my thanks to those who attended the confidential briefing this week. I think that was a very useful forum, and we had a good debate and the chance to take time to look at the topics that were raised in more detail. And I'd like to take the opportunity to encourage all of you to join a working group of some kind. You've got your plan working group, you've got the finance working group, you've got the new equality and diversity working group, you've got the complaints working group, and we value the opportunity, because we then create the private briefing sessions with the working groups to be able to go through in more detail many of the things that we only get to cover in outline here at the Police and Crime panel meeting that we do here with you on a quarterly basis. And we so benefit from your expertise and your experience, and it really brings together, I think, the quality of the work that we do, working with the Commissioner, working with yourselves, and supporting the Chief Constable and the Constabulary. So my thanks to you, and the opportunity just to tell you what we've been doing over the last quarter, and I'll hand back to you now, Chair.
Thank you, James, and I would echo what you said about the working groups. I think another one of our positive steps forward has been to have the subgroups working informally with the Commissioner's office. It reminds me that the role of scrutiny in the role of the Police and Crime Panel is critical friend as well as challenge when required, and I think that's where we've shown that we can be helpful. So I echo that. Thank you. I'll invite the Chairman of the Plan Working Group to make any comments that he wishes first of all, and then I'll pick up any comments from any other members. So Simon?
It's probably best way to comment for me, Chair, is really just to sort of pick up on some of the points that James has mentioned. We've had quite a busy summer in unprecedented times as far as an extension for a Police and Crime Commissioner. So we spent a lot of time with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner talking through how do we set things up to scrutinise both the business plan, key decisions and the Police and Crime plan, very much to look at how we can make best use of this time for the new Police and Crime Commissioner. It's always very challenging in that first 6 months, so that to make sure that we can do what we can to support their smooth integration into what we do with the office. Lots of focus, as I know lots of members will appreciate, about understanding some of those issues behind establishment, strength, the changes, how the uplift will work, and that sort of ongoing work as far as how that resource gets attributed to both local neighbourhood teams, but also those other teams that support our communities. And also just to thank James and the team and the panel members for all the work that we've been doing with Gypsy, Romany and Traveller issues, so that we can re-establish the joint working group. And just to pick up all of those themes, really, it's been a very productive summer, if difficult physically.
Thank you, Simon. Very helpful and informative. Are there any questions from any other members about what they've heard? Not compulsory, but just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to get the brief. Thank you. Okay. Then working forward from that, we're now asked to note the recommendations on
Chair. Jan Warwick had her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that, Jan. My apologies. Do you want to speak?
No, it's not an important question, really. But James, I just wanted to say I was really pleased to see the first round of COVID-related commissioning grants that you put about, and certainly in my area, they were very well received. I can see you've just launched that second round of grants. Has the parameters changed slightly? Have you learnt from that first round of grants that you've then adapted for the second round, or is it just a repeat of the original sort of grant process?
No, so I'll forgive me, I'll correct you slightly. We've had 2 rounds and just opened a third. But however, yes, we've learned a lot. We had quite a broad first round, and what we observed was a lot of people were coming to us wanting us to give £500 so that they could take food to those people who are vulnerable. And whilst I think that's a wonderful idea, it's not the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And so it was very difficult because we had to say, I'm sorry, that's not something we're going to invest in, but we were able to signpost them to other service providers who were doing that. So we felt that that was useful. So we did change very quickly to say, this is what the Police and Crime Commissioner does. This is more focused in terms of, and we focused in very quickly on local, very local, and that's why we're looking at very local. So it's crime prevention. So we've had cricket pavilions and scout huts and all coming to us saying, well, because of this time, we're not using it, but we're worried about the risk to the things we keep there. Would you be able to give us some money to help either put CCTV in or to be able to remotely monitor? And so the commissioners, because if we can do something to protect that, it means that it's less that risk of being burgled. It means that we haven't got police officers. You don't have to call 999 or 101. So we feel it's a really worthwhile investment. And I think what happens is that, again, I'm not the politician here, so I'm just making the straightforward observation. But what it does is it allows people who pay council tax to see it where it goes, and it goes back into their local community. And I think that's what we all want, that people should be helped by police when they need it, but they should also be afforded the opportunity to protect themselves. So that very low level investment has seen significant benefit, and that's why we've gone to the safer streets, the third round. Over the summer in the second round, we didn't get so many people bidding, and so we closed it quickly. We're extending this round for 6 weeks. It runs to the end of October, but we'll extend it further because we're expecting quite a lot of people to want us to continue to support them, particularly as we see this rise in COVID infections and perhaps local lockdowns. And so to support those communities at this time during COVID-19 has proved quite valuable.
Thank you, James, for that. David Shields, did I see your hand up?
Yes, Chair, thank you. And prompted in no small way by, I thought, a very powerful deputation earlier this morning, I wondered, James, if you could expand for the rest of the panel on the Safer Streets Fund and what opportunities there are from that for sharing learning and good practice with other high crime areas in our suburbs, our coastal areas and rural communities.
Thank you, Councillor Shields. Absolutely essential to respond to that. It's a significant investment. It's looking at prevention and community engagement. And so from our perspective and on behalf of Michael, pleased to be able to sponsor, support, bid for and make that investment. I would like to make a plea to you as councillors through to your communities that particularly with the Safer Streets Fund, there's a huge ambition, a very limited time, and it does need the support of local councillors to coordinate the community's effort. And so we approached Councillor Shields as an office and said, would he help us do that here? And that's proved, I think, quite successful in terms of the focus, the energy that generates and the work that's being done. But the learning for us is very much it needs councillor support because the communities need some, I think, local input to support a direction of travel. Otherwise, it's very difficult to see progress quickly. Particularly the work we're doing in Southampton has some impact on planning. Now the council need to be able to respond to that, otherwise the money won't get spent. And so again, the easements that creates by working with yourselves as community safety partners is absolutely essential. So I think if there was one point that I'd say is clear learning is that the community safety partnership and the support they give is absolutely key to seeing impact in the community.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, James. So members, I'll now put this to the recommendation. It's only that we're asked to note the recommendation on page 87, note the update against the police and crime plan. I'm quite happy if members just want to switch on to unmute and then just express their verbal agreement. Are members happy with that?
Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Right, excellent. Thank you very much. I shall now move on to item 10, which is the Police and Crime Plan Working Groups at pages 123, 136. There was further discussion at the last meeting of the panel when we were invited and said we would be presenting a draft terms of reference for the new Equality and Diversity Working Group. So just looking around just to check if any members have any comments on the draft terms of reference. And I acknowledge the points that were made by James, that he's very supportive. I think it's another good step for the panel that we have an Equality and Diversity Working Group. And we know we've got various membership agreed already, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So is there any comments any members want to make? If not, I'll go to the recommendations. Okay, so I'll now ask members to vote on the recommendations which are outlined at page 47. I'll read them out. Firstly, that the appointment of an Equality and Diversity Working Group is agreed, that the terms of reference subject to any recommendations made at this meeting are agreed, and that in accordance with the terms of reference, appointments are sought for membership of the working group, and I do have a number of members who have expressed an interest. Could members just indicate if they're happy with that, please?
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
Very much.
Thank you. Very sounds unanimous. Anybody against, please show. No abstentions either. And I see Lee joined us a little while ago. Nice to see you, Lee. So on the basis the recommendations are agreed, at our last meeting, councillors Diane Andrews, Simon Bound, Dave Shields and Mr Bob Purkis expressed an interest in joining the working group, and have also received an interest from councillor Narinda Baines. Therefore, we have 5 members laid out under the terms of reference, and membership of the working group is agreed. So I'll ask our Democratic Services Officer to proceed with setting up a future meeting cycle for the working group, and those names I've mentioned will now be on that, so that's okay, and you can deal with it appropriately. Okay, everybody's happy with that. I shall now move on to item 11. So this is the work programme of the panel for this year. It's outlined at pages 53 to 58. Are there any questions from any members on the work programme? Okay, then I'll move to recommendation, which is on page 53, and that is that the work programme is agreed. And once again, members, I'll ask you to unmute and just tell me you're happy with that.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
So, members, our next meeting is scheduled for 29th of January, when we will be reviewing the Commissioner's proposed precept. I'll remind you of the very comprehensive picture that the Chief Constable gave to us today. We are in unprecedented times. I look particularly to Michael Coombs and the Finance Working Group to give us as much information as we need in January. It's a really important time at the moment. I think it was alluded to that we may not have the fair funding review by then, but we may have the comprehensive spending review by then. So we just need to watch closely and on behalf of the community of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, make the right decisions on the precept at that time. On that basis, members, we have actually reached the end of the meeting. Can I thank everybody for all the travel that they've done to get here today, albeit through the digital lines. And thank you for your attendance. Thank you for making it a lot easier for me as chair to chair this meeting. And it's been really enjoyable and very informative. And I hope the members of the public have had an opportunity to see us in action as well. And on that basis, I shall ask for the webcast to be ended.